Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Poe, and today I'm going to be revisiting my anticipated releases list from the second quarter, so April, May, and June of 2022. So there are 15 books that I had on that list, and I've had over a year now to get to them. So I wanted to check in with you about what I've read, what I haven't read, what my feelings on the books were, and just sort of how successful I was in choosing anticipated releases for myself. So going in the same order as my original list, which was by publication date, I have High Spirits by Camille Gomera-Tavarez. So this is a YA collection of short stories, all kind of interconnected about sort of a Dominican American family. And the stories in this have kind of a very literary feel, a lot of magical realism, some really interesting social commentary and themes, and quite beautiful writing. But I found that as I was reading through these stories, even though I could appreciate many of those things, I wasn't really very connected to the characters or the stories, and sometimes it just sort of flowed over me without me being very engaged in what was going on. So I thought it was really interesting how literary this YA collection was, but I just didn't find myself fully engaged, so I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next was A Duet for Home by Karina Glaser, which is about a young girl whose family ends up becoming homeless after her father had passed away and her mother entered a deep depression. And it's all about her trying to keep her family together and take care of everyone, but also follow her own passions for things like violin playing and making new friends in the homeless shelter that they're staying in. This book I thought was just like really lovely. It had great friendships in it. It had a lot of interesting themes and a lot of exploration of homelessness and the way that homelessness is perceived and the shame, but also the way that we deal with grief and losing family members. So I thought that that was all fantastic. The ending did wrap up just a little bit too neatly in a bow for me, but other than that, it was a great middle grade, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next was Woman Eat Me Whole by Asantewa Diaka, which was a poetry collection that was just all about womanhood and body and a lot of these explorations of sort of identity and social themes. I think that it was very visceral at times for me, but I still thought that the poetry was, really moving and covered a lot of very interesting themes. So if you like that kind of political identity-based poetry, you'll probably like this. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next was Sanctuary by Andi C. Buchanan, which is a contemporary fantasy / light cozy horror, which is all about a group of queer and neurodivergent people who share this big rambling old mansion together that's kind of falling apart and also has a lot of ghosts, and many of the people who live in this house can see the ghosts and they interact with them and they have a good relationship, except that one day a very negative ghost is introduced into their community and other ghosts start disappearing, and so it's all about them trying to come together and protect the ghosts in their home. I think that the story has like so much heart and so much excellent just almost utopia world building of people who are living in a dystopia, which is, the modern world, but trying to find a space for themselves. So there's all this found family and everything like that. And it's just got like a lot of heart to it that I really liked. It is a bit of a slow book though. And I found that it was very hard for me to actually get through it because I kept just kind of disengaging from it. It also was a little info dumping at times, which is never my style. But even so, I still thought it was a pretty solidly good book. So I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next is Forbidden City by Vanessa, which is a historical fiction set sort of during the communist era in China, so like the 1960s, 1970s, and follows a young girl who I believe becomes the mistress of Mao. I actually just started this the other day, so I've read maybe a chapter in it, and I quite liked the initial chapter in writing, so I'm excited to continue, but I have very little to report so far. Next is Kaikei by Vaishnavi Patel. This is a retelling of a classic Indian myth, the Ramayana, from the perspective of one of the characters who in the Ramayana is sort of a villain character. It is, in a sense, the stepmother of the main character from that epic. And this story tells her story. So it tells her life growing from childhood into womanhood and the choices that she's making and sort of how she's perceived to be a villain by other characters. It introduces some really interesting magic system in here that I thought was very cool, and it has a lot of that excellent world building from, you know, this epic that I thought was very nice. But this book ended up not working out for me, and I DNF'd it because it also felt very heavy-handed. I didn't like the way that it lacked subtlety in some of the discussions, and I also felt that the way that it tried to tell this character who'd been villainized in the past tell her story, but in doing so it sort of heroized her and villainized the other characters, and it just felt a little heavy-handed for me, so it didn't quite work out. A book that did work out for me though was Siren Queen by Nghi. This ended up being one of my favorite books last year. This is a historical fantasy set in the sort of dawn of cinema and this really wonderful period of screen and film. So it follows a Chinese American actress who is trying, despite all of the sexism and racism in the film industry in the 1930s, I believe, to make a name for herself and become a star. And it's all about her clawing her way there, and this is all set in this historical period, but it is a version of history where all sorts of magic exists. So demons, and kind of a lot of the heads of the different studios are demons, and people have to make different deals with them, and just all kinds of magical beings and everything like that woven into it. It's really atmospheric, has a lot of kind of Me Too commentary, and just really comments a lot on the film industry and on history, and I loved this. I thought it was just so beautiful to read, and I loved everything about it. I gave it 5 stars. Next was The One Who Loves You the Most by Medina. This is a YA contemporary about a teenager who is trying to just explore their identity, both their kind of racial and cultural identity because they are adopted, but also their gender identity. And so it's kind of about them figuring out who they are and dealing with a lot of the kind of angst of being a young teenager who is struggling with figuring out their life. This I ended up DNFing because it not only was very angsty, but also was very heavy-handed for me. I think that maybe for teenagers who are totally new to a lot of the conversations in this, it could have a lot of really great information, but for me it just felt like reading PSA after PSA about different social topics. So about gender identity and about racism and about microaggressions and all those sorts of things. And so that brought me out of the story way too much for me to continue reading it. Next is Breathe and Count Back from 10 by Natalia Sylvester. This is a YA contemporary about a teenage girl who has hip dysplasia, and she is part of a Peruvian American family. Her parents are very overprotective, but she is really struggling because she wants to go and live life the way that she wants to live it. And in particular, she wants to get a summer job working at this aqua park where she can be a mermaid. And when I heard about this from Cynthia at Book Whimsy, I thought, oh, this sounds really, really cool. And so I put it on my anticipated releases list. But Cynthia warned me this has a lot of like drama and angst in it, which I know you don't like. And so I've been kind of thinking about that. And after a couple of other books that I have DNF'd after Cynthia warned me has a lot of drama and angst, which I know you don't like, I'm like, you know, I should just listen to her warning and maybe not pick it up. So this one I'm gonna mark as lost interest. So I never picked it up, and I don't think that I will. Another book that I haven't picked up yet, but that I still do want to get to, is The Women's House of Detention, A Queer History of Forgotten Prison by Hugh Ryan. So this is a nonfiction book talking about a prison that existed, I believe, in New York, where women were sent, especially queer women or political activists, when the government just kind of wanted to push them aside. So I know that like Angela Davis was at this prison, and also just a lot of other queer women who were sort of punished and sidelined by society. So this sounds like such a great nonfiction. I really do want to pick it up, but my brain has not been in the space to pick up heavy things recently. So this might have to wait for a while, but I still really do want to get to this one. Next is We Measure the Earth with Our Bodies by Tsering Lama. This is a historical fiction about a Tibetan refugee family who left when China kind of invaded Tibet in the 1950s, 1960s, and immigrated abroad. But decades later, there is some issues because there are some sort of historical and religious artifacts that have been taken from their people and are now, kind of available, and they want to figure out what to do about them. This is a book that I started and I didn't get very far in before it got way too graphic in the body horror for me, but I thought that the writing in this was really, really fantastic, and the historical period and everything that it had to say was awesome. So if you're not squeamish like me, I think that this still could be a very interesting book to pick up. Next is Ma and Me by Putsata Reang. This is a memoir of kind of not just Reang's life, but her life connected to her mother. And her family were refugees from Vietnam in the 1970s. And it's all about them sort of being in Oregon. They were moved to Corvallis, Oregon, and her growing up there and her relationship with her mom. So this is very heavily about her relationship with her mom. So it tells her mom's history as well as her history and just the memories of growing up. Reang is a journalist and has covered a lot about Cambodia as an adult. And it's just all about that connection to Cambodia, the connection to her mother, but also some of the difficulties and issues with her relationship with her mother because of the fact that she's queer and how unaccepted that is in Cambodian culture, and just this kind of push and pull between her and her mom. So I am actually in the middle of this. I'm about halfway through. I've been listening to it on audiobook and it is fantastic, just so good, but I'm a slow audiobook listener, and so my hold expired some time ago and it's got a very long wait list, so I'm still waiting to get it back from the library, but I am highly anticipating finishing this. Next is Woman of Light by Fajardo-Anstine. This is a historical fiction set in Colorado and the Lost Territories in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and it sort of is a multi-generational family saga. Deals with a lot of issues of racism and of sexism and just issues that face this family who are Indigenous and Latinx. So I really loved a lot of the aspects of this setting and just the stories that it's telling, but I never found myself really getting into this book, and I struggled. I tried so hard to pick this book up and I just never could get very far. I just somehow just wasn't very engaged in the characters. Maybe because it was multi-generational and we just got little pieces of some of the past characters. I'm not really sure. So I did DNF it, but it was more just because I was never picking it up rather than because anything was really wrong with it. Next is The Grief of Stones by Katherine Addison, which is the sort of sequel to The Witness for the Dead, which I had read the other year and really loved. And The Grief of Stones sort of follows, it's this almost like cozy mystery type of story. It follows the same character who is sort of investigating various deaths and things that have happened. And this one is focused especially on some girls who are taken into this school and maybe abused. I did not get very far into this because somehow, even though I'd loved the previous story, this one really wasn't working for me. I just got very annoyed with some of the repetitions in the writing style, and I just didn't like how certain things were handled, and I just wasn't into it, so I ended up DNFing it. And lastly was The Dawn Hounds by Sasha Stronach. This is a New Zealand author who actually won the Sir Julius Vogel Award for this book, and then later it was re-released, republished in the US with some additions. And I picked it up and I thought that there was some like fantastic world building in this. It's got this kind of biological punk type of feel to it, but the tone of this book was just not for me. It's very much got a cyberpunk type of feel, which almost always turns me off of books, and there was quite a bit of body horror, which, if you know me, that's almost always just a reason for me to DNF. And so I did DNF this one. Just wasn't quite my style of book, but I thought that there was some very cool stuff going on in here. So if you don't mind body horror and you like cyberpunk types of vibes to stories, this is a very cool one to pick up. So now let's talk about the stats for my kind of Q2 of 2022 anticipated releases. As you might have noticed as I went through this, I had a lot of DNFs. I had so many DNFs in this. Almost half of the books were either DNF or lost interest, which is not the greatest in terms of a hit ratio for what I put on my anticipated releases and what I actually love. I did like the books that I finished quite a bit, and I even had like an absolute favorite, which was Siren Queen, but it wasn't the greatest, and I still have quite a few books that I'm either in the middle of or haven't picked up yet. So this quarter, I would say, wasn't the most successful, but I also think that a lot of the books that I picked up were things that I truly was interested in reading, and they just didn't work out for me. Even from authors that I had read before, or authors that, like books that friends of mine had read and highly recommended, and they just didn't work out for me. So I feel like even if I hadn't put them on this anticipated releases list, I probably would have picked many of those books up, and they just wouldn't have worked out for me, and that's sometimes the luck of the draw. But I thought it was very interesting how the statistics worked out for this one. Also, just as a note about this quarter kind of revisiting my anticipated releases, I had a little bit longer to get to these than originally intended, just because I'm a couple months late in filming this, and I only got to some of these very, very recently. So I was very slow to pick up quite a few books on this list as well. One other thing that I wanted to just briefly mention is that I'm thinking about this format for video. So anticipated releases is something that I just started last year, and then this year I thought, oh, maybe I'll revisit them. But I'm finding that the wrap-up part of this is, I feel like, a little repetitive because I've already wrapped up all of these books and talked about them before. And I guess, I don't know how much people watch other videos, and so maybe you've missed some of those, and so that's new, or you just joined and this is new for you. But I feel like maybe it's a little repetitive. The part that's most interesting to me is probably the statistics. But for statistics, it's like, I will do an annual statistics anyway at the end of the year, where I will talk about all of this, and then it'll be a much broader view. So rather than quarter by quarter, it'll be, for the whole year, kind of what did I get to and how did I feel about them. So I'm wondering if doing these videos really has much of a point. It feels a little repetitive to me. So if you guys have any feelings one way or the other, let me know, but I'm leaning towards not doing this for the other quarters, and just at the end of the year doing this stats wrap up, because that's the part that's most interesting to me. So anyway, those are some of my thoughts on the books that I had on my anticipated releases list from last year, 2022, the second quarter, April, May, and June. If you guys have read any of these, if you have different thoughts, if you have any thoughts in general about anticipated releases and how successful you are in terms of enjoying the things that you put on your list, I'd love to hear from you. Just leave me a comment down below.